In this lesson, we're going to look at the three different types of render modes that are available in KeyShot. Now, I suppose technically you could say there are 4 levels because you can press the screenshot button and you'll get a screenshot. However, I'm talking about the final finished renders that you can set, adjust, change the resolution, and things like that. So we can get into our different render modes by clicking on this render button. And what that'll do is pop up a window here, and this is our render option windows. And make sure that the word quality is highlighted because this is where our 3 different types of render modes are going to be situated. Now by default, you're going to be rendering in the advanced control. And for most things, this is fine. I really used the advanced control for several years before I had a few projects that required me to use the other settings. And I'll get into why you might need to use the other settings in a little bit here. But the advanced control is a very good setting. And we'll just kind of go through these quickly. And I'll just sort of give you some explanation about them. Now, some of these you've seen before. They're very similar to if I hit my space bar and get my project window. You'll see some of these are right in here. So we've got ray bounces, shadow quality. Now, if you have these set in your settings tab, that automatically will override or it will set these to the same settings. Let me just close that for now. So samples is the number of times that KeyShot will go through and kind of re-render and re-render your image until it smooths it out. Each time it's smoothing it out. So when you see an actual render going and it starts out very blurry and then it gets nicer and nicer and nicer, those are different render passes or samples going on. Now when KeyShot is just sitting here, if I make the camera move, notice it's a little low res and then you see it kind of jiggling and moving, that's it rendering up its samples. So it'll kind of continue to res itself up while it's sitting there. But by setting the samples, we're limiting that. We can use this to not only improve the quality of the rendering, but to kind of adjust how long it takes to render. Ray bounces is just kind of quite simply how much light is bounced around. If you find that you're working on anything with transparency and you're using the advanced control, you may need to set ray bounces to 8 or higher. If you see any kind of a dark color in your transparent materials, that's a clue that you need to up your number of ray bounces. Anti-aliasing is simply how smooth the pixels are going to be around the edges of things. You notice on websites as you kind of zoom in, you can see some nasty things going around on the edges of images. Anti-aliasing really kind of smooths that out. But for the most part, I'd probably use that 1, maybe 2. Any of these settings, you don't want to turn them up way too high. High numbers here really increase your rendering times. Shadow settings, if you set this to 2 under your project settings, this will be set to 2 in your render window. It really only affects your ground shadows. So this is a way for you to improve the quality of your ground shadows. Global illumination is how your indirect light bounces around. If you have any kind of transparency, in order for that to look nice, you're going to have global illumination checked again under your project settings. And pixel blur adjusts the small amounts of blurring that are used on labels and things like that to smooth out how they look. So that's the advanced control. And the important thing to know is one of the nice things about KeyShot is you can see what your renderings are going to look like while you're working in them. A lot of other renderers, you have to set them up, hit render, and then wait for a little render window to appear to really know what all of your changes are going to be making. Now the thing to remember is advanced control is actually using a slightly different renderer than your preview renderings. So sometimes your advanced control won't look like what you're actually seeing on screen while you're working. In order to use the exact same renderer, you need to use either maximum time or maximum samples. And you may find that if you have a scene that has a lot of transparent materials, that the advanced control just doesn't give you the same results you're seeing on screen when you're setting up your scene. So using the maximum time or maximum samples ensures you're using the same render engine and it allows you to control things. So if we click on maximum time, what this allows us to do is set how long the rendering will go for. So if you've got a presentation due or you just don't want your renderings to go for hours and hours, you just set in here exactly how long you would like each rendering to last, and you can either add it to the queue that way if you have KeyShot Pro, or you can just hit the render button, and if you put in an hour, it's going to render for an hour, then be finished. Now, if you happen to come back to the computer and if after 30 minutes you think what's showing on screen in the render window looks good, then you can stop and save the rendering at that point. It is kind of nice if you don't know exactly how long to set it to just kind of put some big number in here that works, and then periodically check back on the rendering, and once it looks good, just hit stop and save. Now, the maximum time and maximum samples are going to be using your ray bounce settings and your shadow quality settings here. So again, if your object looks good on screen, and that'll typically be because you've already set your ray bounces to what they need to be just while you're working in your preview mode, the same with your shadow quality, then your rendering should turn out great. So that's maximum time. Now, maximum samples, this allows you to go from the default of 16, or you can drop it lower, to 256 samples. And this thing will just kind of keep re-rendering itself and smoothing itself out until it's sampled 256 times, and then the rendering will finish. Again, it's using these same settings from here, and just like maximum time, if after 30 minutes or so, or however long, you walk back in the room and you see your rendering and it looks beautiful, it's exactly what you want, you can just hit stop and save at that point on the window that's open. You don't have to let it run the whole time. But if you've got a lot of time and you want the absolute best rendering you can get, just crank that all the way up and hit render, and you will get an absolutely beautiful rendering out of the deal. So that's our look at the 3 different types of render modes that are available in KeyShot.